All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Andrea DeHaan. I am the outreach coordinator for the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. So I put together this series of events where you have opportunities to hear from our esteemed alumni about their experiences post-graduation, and really this is done in the service of helping students gather ideas for how you might be using your degrees when you leave. And to learn, as well, that it's not always a straight line. It is often, a much more wobbly up and down path, but we like to see how it is that our alumni find success, and today's alum is no exception. So I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to Ernesto before I turn the time over to him. Ernesto Lopez currently leads the Online Programs Initiative at USU Extension, where he strives to improve the reach of educational programs to better serve community needs. Previously, he worked at Harris Research as part of the training department, providing support to both domestic and international business franchise owners. He also served the community as a parent involvement specialist at Bear River Head Start for more than 10 years. He holds a bachelor's degree in Spanish and a master's in instructional technology and learning sciences from Utah State University. Having just run a successful election campaign to retain his seat, Ernesto has served on the Logan City Council since 2020, where he is the first Hispanic and immigrant to hold a Logan City seat. As part of his responsibilities, he was appointed and participates in the city's Light and Power Advisory Board, Cache Valley Center for the Arts Board, Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and the Renewable Energy and Sustainability Advisory Board. Along with his wife and 2 kids, Ernesto loves living in Logan and enjoys the outdoors, photography, and music. He's been invited by numerous schools and programs to share his experiences and inspire minority kids in the Valley, and had formerly served in various community organizations and initiatives, including the Latino Advisory Council for the Logan Library and the Excellence for Latino Students Initiative at Logan High School. And with that, Ernesto, I would love to turn the time over to you, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for the invitation. Hope everybody is doing well today. Thank you for sharing all of that. So I'll be honest, when Andrea reached out and said, hey, we'd love to have you come and present for our students, I was like, what exactly about, right? And she said, well, just about your career and your shifts that you've made. And so I was like, yeah, I guess I could share about that. Many times I get approached to share about just my life in general. So some of the slides that I prepared for today come from those kinds of presentations, but based on what Andrea asked me to kind of focus more on, I titled this Change as Your Ally. And as Andrea said, I have shifted at times a little bit in the things that I do, but I actually see them quite a bit interconnected. Like the change did happen, but there were things that led on to that change. It wasn't just like sporadically and non-organic. So to begin with, I feel like change is inevitable. I don't know if all of you would agree. I think most people would agree that change is inevitable. And in my experience, adaptability has been king, and being able to not resist change as much has allowed me to, I feel, succeed a little bit more than if I had resisted. And so that's why I said adaptability is key. I think resistance is natural. Would you agree? Resistance is natural. Like we all tend to kind of push back against forces that are trying to make us change direction. I think it's important that we recognize our own strengths and weaknesses, that we actually listen to feedback from people so that we become more aware of those things that kind of emphasize the things that we're good at or that maybe we need to work on. Along the way, I also have realized that failure is not defeat. And I'll share a little bit about that. Determination, patience, persistence, they all may seem related, but in their own way, I think there's different moments when one of those are more present in our lives. And then, of course, I do try to emphasize that we don't dream enough at times, that we can do a better job at seeing ourselves in different roles, in bigger roles. And so that's been my experience so far. So I have some pictures, some slides to share with you about my life. As Andrea mentioned, I am an immigrant. So I grew up in Mexico, and I was 15 when I moved to the United States. This is a picture of my family. I'm the little guy in the middle. And I was 4 years old when we arrived from my native city of Monterrey in Mexico to Tijuana. It's a border city. My dad is now a retired minister, but his whole adult life he was a minister in Mexico. And so they did move quite a bit in Mexico prior to moving to the US. And in fact, that is what brought us to the United States. So from a very young age, I did experience change in a big way. This is my last year of school in Mexico. I'm about 15 years old. This is a picture, a very traditional school shot in Mexico. If you have kids there, every year they get a picture taken like this with their different school and grade sign that they're holding. I don't know if you can see me very well, but I am right there. That is me. And because change is inevitable, you can see that I used to have hair. So, so when we moved from Tijuana to southern Idaho first, it was quite the culture shock. I started working when I was 13 years old, and I was a bag boy at a supermarket similar to Walmart. And I actually enjoyed that job quite a bit because being a teenager in Mexico, not very many kids actually in a city worked. And so I actually had a little bit of money to go out with my friends and have some fun. So that's why I enjoyed being a bag boy in the supermarket in Mexico. But when I moved to the United States, which was a huge, huge change, we went from a heavily urban city, Tijuana, to a very rural town in southern Idaho called Castleford. And culture, language, food, even the environment was different. And so, I had to adapt. And in here, I got to experience a couple of the summers that I lived in southern Idaho, working in bean and beet fields. And I quickly realized that I did not want to do that for the rest of my life. And so I really became dedicated to school. And I was a very good student in Mexico. But in the United States, I felt like I had an opportunity to succeed as a student. And in 1998, I applied to a grant. It's called Earthwatch. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's a nationwide program, and they select a few students in the country to go on different research expeditions. And I got to go to Stanford Human Genome Center and spent a couple of weeks there sequencing DNA. Back then, it was not as big as maybe now. In fact, that was right in the beginning phases of I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Human Genome Project, but that was the big effort to sequence the entire human DNA. And so that was the first time I got hands-on in a lab. I got super excited. I truly saw myself as a future scientist. Maybe a chemist, maybe a biochemist. My mom had been suffering from arthritis, and I wanted to work in medication for arthritis. And so that was one of my dreams. So at a young age of 18 years old, probably a lot of you have done this. You moved away from your home, maybe. I moved away from my home. This is 1999. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with Hispanic culture, generally speaking, but usually people at 18 years old in the Hispanic culture do not move away from their home to go study. I feel like that's a very kind of Western type of culture. And so my parents really suffered seeing me kind of depart, and I would go and visit them. It's about 3 hours away where they used to live. But it was a huge change again. And so with all these changes, I think to me, change did not feel like it was necessarily something that would deter me from making decisions. So being here as a student, I feel like I had a great experience. I got to discover new passions. I fell in love with the outdoors. I started hiking with friends. And also I did started doing photography. I'll go a little bit more into that here in a minute. My appreciation for cultural awareness and diversity grew as a student. I was the president of the Hispanic Student Union while I was here. So I started developing some of those skills that later definitely came into play. This is 2004. And I had just graduated from Utah State University with my bachelor's in Spanish. Not before, as you remember, I mentioned I was going to be a scientist, right? And I spent almost 3 years in kind of pursuing that. And at the same time that I was pursuing that, I went through some life experiences that kind of changed me as a person. And I worked, one of those experiences being working in a lab for the Natural Resources Department. I worked 2 summers there, and I did processing of soil samples and sage samples. And after 2 summers of doing that, I quickly realized that I did not see myself working in a lab for the rest of my life. Even as exciting as science was for me, and I still love science, I felt like my social part of my personality had grown so much being a student that I saw myself more involved with social services. And so I changed my major, and 2 years later, I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Spanish. Now, unfortunately, and I say ready for the real world, I thought I was ready for the real world, but life teaches you usually different. And that's why I say the vision that we have of our future, most of the times, is not bulletproof. There are many life events that happen that usually makes us rethink what we have planned for ourselves. And sometimes some of those things are out of our control. Sometimes they are within our control. But in my experience, this is very true. So, after I graduated from Utah State University in 2004, I actually moved back with my parents to Idaho. And right before I moved back, I had started dating my now wife. And I found myself driving back quite a bit just to see her, to spend time with her. And I also struggled to find a full-time job in the social services area, which is what I wanted to do. Something like maybe not a social worker, but maybe a case manager of some sort for a social program. And even though I had my bachelor's degree, I was not able to find that in southern Idaho. And I did apply to quite a few places. And the only place, after, I don't know, almost 2 months of being in Idaho, the only place that hired me was Target. And I worked unloading trucks early in the morning. And that was pretty frustrating. And so after a couple of months of doing that, I told my parents, they gave me the bad news, I'm moving back to Logan. I'm driving there almost every 2 weeks anyways to see my girlfriend. And so I applied for a job, and I actually got it here in Logan at Bear River Head Start. I was hired as a teacher's assistant in a preschool. Head Start is a program, a federal funded program that serves low-income and families with social services and education services. And so I was a teacher's aide in a classroom, and I developed a lot of patience in that job working with little kids, 3-4-year-olds. And we got married in 2000, at the end of 2004. And then a couple of years later, this is a picture of our family. And of course, that's another instance of change, right? You get married, you have kids, and it comes with all of this. And by then, I had moved from my teacher's aide position in Head Start to a role called parent involvement. And in there, I got the opportunity to encourage parents to be more involved with their kids' education and also with the program. The program functions in a way that any time that the parents spend within the program, helping the program or helping their kids meet their educational goals, it counts towards their funding. And so that was part of my role, kind of educating parents about how to get involved with the program and their children's education. But life happens, and even though I had a plan to eventually go back to school, it took a little while. But finally, in around 2008, while working at Head Start, I had kind of become the go-to guy for tech questions. I don't know if you're familiar at all with Head Start, but it is mostly women that work there. I was one of 3, at times the only male in an employee base of about 120 employees. And so almost all technical questions, connecting a printer, my computer is doing X, what do I do to fix it? Can you help us with a presentation, with a PowerPoint? Almost ended up going to me at some point. And so a friend, husband to a coworker, once told me, hey, you do a lot of this here at Head Start. Have you ever considered instructional technology? And I was like, what is instructional technology? and I was like, well, I guess I'll look into it. So that was 2008. New Year's Eve between 2008 and 2009, I told my wife, I'm going back to school. And she was like, just like that? And I was like, I'm ready. I'm ready to go back to school. And I feel like I love learning. In fact, even working here, I've taken, as I work, French courses. I've been trying to learn French in the last few years. Currently, I'm thinking about taking some economics classes myself. But anyways, I told my wife, hey, I'm going back to school. She was very supportive. Thank God my job was also supportive and allowed me to kind of move my schedule around so that I could accomplish that. And so before I move on to that, I want to kind of make a parenthesis. All along, I had also kind of been developing my photography skills. And so my very first camera I had was when I was like 16 or 17 years old. When I went to that trip to Stanford, I bought myself my very first camera, and it was a film camera, which I think I came back from that trip with like 10 rolls of film that I took during that trip. In 2003, I got my very first digital camera, and I was the very first of actually any friend that I knew in college that had a digital camera. And so when I got married, I invested in an SLR camera, a better camera. And I started following, I asked the best photographer in the Valley to let me kind of see him work a couple times. His name was Steve Mackley, and he was a super nice guy and allowed me to kind of shadow him for a few days. And so that put together with the tech expertise that I had been developed, it made sense to explore instructional technology. And I looked into it, and I was like, yeah, I could do this in a couple of years. It actually took me less than 2 years to complete that degree, and that's where the career shift, the biggest career shift that I had probably happened. And even though it was the biggest one, there was some connections to the previous one because I had become this go-to tech guy at my previous job. And so after I graduated, it did take me a couple of years to land a full-time role as an instructional designer, but the role was also a trainer. It wasn't just design, instruction, and online courses. It was actually probably a good portion of my time was as a trainer. And so once a week, we would have training events for new franchisees. And the franchisor is the biggest carpet cleaning franchise system in the world. It's called ChemDry. And I don't know if you've ever heard of them. They do a fantastic job. Here, we're actually training franchisees on how to use a product that removes urine odors from carpet. And so, being a trainer, growing up in a church setting, I was actually kind of comfortable being in front of people, but I had to really polish those skills being in front of people and in explaining how to use products and equipment. So that was my experience there, and I was there for almost 5 years. I started as an instructional designer, and a couple years later, I became the distance learning manager for them. And that was a great experience for many reasons. It pushed me to develop new skills. It allowed me to travel the country quite a bit, actually. I probably visited most of the East Coast and most of the big cities on the West Coast as well. And so that also is part of a skill that you have to develop, kind of traveling for work and just using your time efficiently, planning your trips, and so on. And finally, in 2019, I finally got a job at USU. And I say finally because from 2006 to 2019, I probably applied to 6 or 7 jobs here at USU in different areas, mostly the social services, maybe recruiting. Once I got my master's, I did apply to a couple of instructional designer jobs. But finally, in 2019, I got hired at USU. And I say finally because it felt truly like a long time coming. I always dreamed of working for USU. Ever since I got recruited to come to USU in '99, I wanted to work for Utah State University. So finally it happened. And so that was that. And so the other part, we talked about being on city council, was the community involvement piece. In 2014, I was part of the founding group for the Latino Advisory Council for the library. And so all throughout my time, all along, both in Head Start, at Harris Research, and even now, as you know, working for Utah State University, I have always been involved in the community, which in October of last year, I never saw myself. If you had met me 14 months ago and asked me, hey, Ernesto, would you ever consider public service? I would have probably said no. I'm not a politician. And then that vacancy happened, and somebody here at USU reached out to me, somebody that I personally did not know, and said, hey, would you ever consider running for city council? And I was like, why? And she was like, well, you've done so much in the community. I think you would have a great shot at actually getting appointed for this vacancy. And I was like, never thought about that. So I applied, and out of 15 people that applied for that vacancy, that vacant seat, I got appointed. And then come summer of this year, I had to make the decision, do I actually want to continue to serve on city council? Or was this kind of like a tried it, didn't like it? And I quickly realized that the things that I enjoyed about it were great. The things that maybe I wasn't too big a fan of were not outweighed by those things. And the most important factor for me, being a minority, being an immigrant and a Hispanic, I felt like I was opening doors. If I could win and stay in the city council, I felt like I could continue to open doors for other minorities in local government. So that was kind of like the force driving me to continue to do this. And thank God, I did win the election just last Tuesday, and so for the next 4 years, I'll be able to serve on city council with that. So that is a very quick timeline. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. A lot of people sometimes have questions of city council, but you can ask me anything about the other roles that I was involved in, and why or what happened that made me change my mind. Oh, and I think my experience there has been to learn, learn, and learn. It is quite the learning curve at city council, and this is my family present day. Yeah. Yes.
What have you found your experience has been like serving on city council, like as the only Hispanic member of city council? Has that been hard or?
You know, I didn't know what to expect when I joined city council, and I have truly felt welcomed by everyone, and both in the other members of the city council and the entire government team in the city. And so I have nothing but good things to say about the experience so far. And in fact, that's one of the main reasons why I said, yeah, I can continue to do this. If it had been kind of like a challenging environment in any way, I would have probably think twice before running again. But no, I cannot say anything but good things about being there and how welcoming they've been to me.
Awesome. That's great to hear about our community.
Yes.
I was just wondering, you kind of talked at the beginning about how when you finished undergrad, you had a hard time finding a job and you didn't really have a lot of direction, and if you have any advice for that kind of uncertainty. I don't know, I feel like a lot of college students or recent graduate students, they don't have that direction. Do you have any advice for that?
So one thing that does come to mind is that the economic and job market currently is way different than it was in 2004. If the job market today was what it was in 2004, man, I feel like I would have probably not struggled as much. But I do feel like the way that our economy has evolved has opened doors in different areas that did not even exist then. Being able to work remotely is a huge thing right now. In fact, in my field, in instructional technology, I feel like if I wasn't happy here at Utah State University, in fact, I've been approached by companies to hire me, and I've declined. But I think the biggest advice is to go to many type of presentations like this, find out more of the real day-to-day environment of the job that you're pursuing, the career that you're pursuing, become more familiar with really what's going to be life like after you graduate. And in all reality, when I said it took me 3 years after I got my master's to get my first full-time position here in the Valley, I was almost ready to leave Logan. I had applied to many positions nearby in Lehigh area where there's the Silicon Slopes. I made it to multiple final interviews there. I applied to Saudi Arabia. And I was ready to leave Logan because I felt like it was just not going to happen here. And I call it the infamous 2 years experience that everybody asks for. The way that I finally was able to meet that requirement was consulting. So I did quite a bit of consulting prior to getting my full-time job at Harris Research. Probably, I think, 4 or 5 companies that I did consulting for. So that's a good way to maybe kind of build up that experience, build up your portfolio, and hopefully land that job that you want. What else?
And so obviously the presentation it's easy since you're giving us a summary to make it seem like these things happen very quickly. But it occurs to me, you mentioned several moments in your life where someone presented you with an option that you maybe hadn't been thinking of, whether that was going back to school for a degree, a master's degree, admittedly at a time when the job market was pretty bad, right? 2008, 2009. As well as being presented, with the idea of like, hey, would you ever run for city council? So can you speak a little bit to like your decision-making process around some of those things, or even just about your own ability to have the confidence in trying something that has sort of been presented to you from left field? Like, how did you find the confidence to try things that were so different or so outside maybe what you had done before?
So, decision-making process for that, well, first of all, is kind of seeing the suggestion or the opportunity first by what it is, right? Maybe not overblow it, because many times you may hear somebody, a friend may say, hey, my company is hiring, or you'd be great for this role. And maybe you look at it and you get excited, you're going to be working with your friend, but maybe it is not the best fit. In my personal experience, for example, when somebody told me, have you ever considered instructional technology? I went and looked at what is instructional technology to begin with. Am I even really a good profile to study this? And at first I was like, I'm not sure. What else is there that is related to this? Or what else is there that is related to technology? And I was like, programming? No. I was a bit leaning towards the arts. I'm a musician and I do photography, so I even consider web design, web development. And when I looked at instructional technology, I realized that a lot of instructional designers actually end up doing web design and graphic design. And there were a lot of things that excited me about instructional technology, being able to do video production, being able to do and polish my photography skills. I loved working with people. I feel like I do well working with people, so it allowed me to kind of serve those people that needed to put things together for training. I wasn't super shy about being in front of people, and so trainer was another role that I could do as an instructional designer. So I considered all of those things before making the decision. It made it a little bit easier to make the decision to go back to school, because all along I wanted to, at the very least, get a master's degree. And so that kind of breaks down a barrier, right? Because many times people are like, well, do I really want to get a master's degree? And what good is that going to be? And there are some fields that maybe doesn't make sense, maybe, depending on what your goals are. But in my case, I always knew that I wanted to get, at the very least, a master's degree. I talked about failure is not defeat. I mentioned that I applied to Harvard in 2010 after I finished my master's degree. I did not get in. I've been told many times, you should apply again. And I'm like, yeah, it's just not the right time. And so that's another thing. Time, no at a specific moment in time is not necessarily no forever. And that's where patience and persistence comes into play. Does that answer your
question? Thank you. And I've got one more question for you, Ernesto, which is your initial background, and I appreciated that you told us a bit about your trajectory of like coming and trying and working in labs and realizing like that was not for you. You ended up with a degree in Spanish. You continued to take some classes in French. So you've clearly got a passion for language and language learning. Do you find that you're able to use any of those pursuits in your current career, or do they continue to sort of help you with your processes at work? Can you just speak a little bit to how those skills?
Yeah, no, super helpful. Spanish, at first, so So let me go back to 2002, 2003. I was kind of like my low point in my student career. I was exploring sciences, and I failed one or two classes in chemistry. I think organic chemistry is the one that I failed. And I was just not into it anymore. And personally, I was going through some other things that kind of took my focus away from the things that I needed to focus. And so when I was almost at the moment of saying, college is not for me, I looked back and I said, man, I've been here for almost 3 years. I can't just leave without a degree. And I said, what can I do to leave USC with a degree? And so that's when I looked everywhere. I considered Spanish teaching. Then I looked at Spanish by itself. And in the end, I was like, I just want to get done with something right now. I cannot quit without a degree. And so I finished Spanish in less than 2 years. And it was the best decision ever. As I look back, it opened up to graduate school to begin with. It opened the doors to graduate school, and that alone was worth it. But I have used, and I spoke Spanish, but it validates that you can speak Spanish, write it, and read it. And serving on city council, serving at Head Start, it always became very useful. And even in my current role here at Utah State University, we want to create more programming, more online courses that are actually serving the community needs. And that means potentially creating courses in Spanish for our community. And so I will be very well qualified to do that as well.
Any other questions for Ernesto? Okay. Then I would ask those of you here to just join me in giving Ernesto some snaps. Thank you so much, Ernesto, for taking the time to share your experience with us today and to tell us more about your story. And again, congratulations again on your recent win at the Logan City Council.
Thank you.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing where that takes you, and are just so pleased to have you back on campus at USU, and thought that was in the cards for you, and appreciate you taking the time today to speak with us.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for coming. And for those that watch the recording, thank you for watching this. Let us know if I can answer any questions.
And we can, if you've got any individual questions for Ernesto, feel free to hang out for a few minutes and I will unbox the cookies. Please grab treats on your way out here at the front of the room. Please sign our sign-in sheet. And thank you so much for coming today. We have one more presentation this month in this same room on November 19th. So please look for that information, come back and see us then. And we have a number of online presentations also taking place on Fridays at 1:30. So if we can get you information about any of those events, again, my name is Andrea DeHaan, and you can find me. I'm the lady who sends you the career newsletter with cat memes each week. So I try to put all the information in there, but if you're ever looking for information, you can reach out to me directly. So thank you everyone for coming today, and thank you.